Welcome back, everyone. After quite a hiatus, this is, if you've forgotten, the Buddy Ruski Show. This is episode 8, I believe. It's been a little while. The last show I did was with Aaron Mandel, a close friend of mine and my esteemed guest for the day, who is a filmmaker, an athlete. We just got off the basketball court together, ran a few games.
I think feeling
we
it too.
4-2. Yeah, well, you know, we definitely work people out. Even if the shots aren't falling, it's definitely a run. My guest today is Ned Phillips. Ned, thanks for being on the Buddy Ruski Show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We've been talking about this for a little while now, and as you mentioned off air, we do have some deep cut, unreleased material that maybe will resurface someday. It could, we might bring it back up in this here podcast. But what I really want to talk to you about today, Ned, you are one of the few Durhamites left in the city. It's kind of funny whenever I go around town now and people ask where I'm from. I say, I'm from Durham. And they're like, really? It's like being an exotic animal.
I get the same reaction. It's like people don't even realize that people were born and grew up here.
Yeah, especially, even if you say you're from here or you've been here since like the early 2000s, people find that pretty surprising. So I would love to talk to you about your experience growing up here in Durham, sort of what your path was through high school, because I know you were into sports as much as you are into the arts, maybe more. I always assumed when I talked to Nick Wallhauser, our friend Nick, for his episode, I assumed he had been doing music his whole life, and turns out it was like he was a late bloomer. He didn't really start doing stuff.
I remember when he started messing around with Fruity Loops in high school.
Yeah, so it's different strokes for different folks, I guess. But tell us a little bit about sort of what your upbringing was like here in town, and what maybe pushed you to eventually get into filmmaking, which is what your main career is now.
Oh, man, you want me to tell my life story?
Just the Cliff Notes. Just the Cliff Notes.
Okay. Well, I was born here in a stormy night, December of 1983. And I lived here for a little while, and then my family actually moved to Greensboro for a few years. And then we moved back to Durham when I was like 7. And been here since. So I went to Club Boulevard Elementary, and then I put on my hippie hat and went to Duke School for Children, where I stayed through middle school. But I was very resistant to go there at first because I was like, man, these kids are weird. But I credit that school experience a lot for developing like my creative side, because they were very encouraging of exploration, hands-on kind of stuff. So I think ultimately that helped form where I went. And then I went back into the public school system, went to Riverside, Roll Pirates Roll, which you're a pirate yourself.
Was that a thing back when you were at Riverside?
I was like a junior or senior when we like decided on what the school, like, I don't know, motto. I don't even know what you call that thing is, but that ended up being, I don't know how we arrived at that, but that was like a big thing. We're like, that's what we say now. And it seems pretty corny, but
what year did you graduate from Riverside?
2002.
Okay. Was Mr. Key the principal at that point?
No, I can't even remember.
Okay, because I always thought that was one of his things.
I remember vice principal Dr. Ackley, because he was my assigned, like based on my last name, he was the guy that I had to go to when I got in trouble, which as high school went on became more and more frequent. So I was often sitting in a chair across the desk from him while he dangled my open lunch pass in my face as a punishment for, going to play Frisbee golf.
I always feel like the assistant principals were the ones you had to watch out for. I was never really that scared of principals ever in school, but it was always the assistants that had something to prove.
Yeah.
And so they were a lot tougher on you.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't remember her name. There's one assistant principal that when we were skipping school one day. Kids, you shouldn't, but we did every now and then.
I hope
We
kids
were-
are listening to this show. That'd be awesome.
We were walking through North Gate Mall. I don't know why we were there, but we saw one of the assistant principals also like coming towards us the other way. And there was this weird moment of like, oh, should we dart and go hide or just like hold the line? And we just kept walking. And there was this weird sort of acknowledgement that you're not at school and you're not at school, so neither of us are ever going to speak of this again. And it was funny. So yeah, I'm always looking out for assistant principals. I'm not worried about the main one.
So did you, if I remember, because I don't think we overlapped at Riverside, you said you were 03?
02.
02, okay, yeah, so I didn't get there till 05.
Oh yeah.
But you, from what I know, did quite a few sports at Riverside.
Yeah, I grew up playing soccer pretty much like my whole life, and so started doing that. As soon as I got to Riverside, I remember being a freshman showing up to like the first like open field Riverside High School soccer experience, and I get out there. My dad dropped me off. And I get out there, and the only other person out there is this dude named Mike Gell, who went on to play at like Carolina and was just like a legend in like local soccer. And it was like me and him out there, and I was just watching him like taking shots and dribbling around. I was like, what have I gotten myself into, man? It's like, I'm not cut out for this.
That's why I quit soccer after middle school. I was like, I know what my limit is.
But he was a cut above. Like, I ended up being very competitive, in high school soccer or whatever. But I played year round, club and all that stuff. But it was when I was at Riverside that I saw lacrosse for the first time. And I started playing lacrosse as a junior. I tried to start playing earlier, but my mom wouldn't buy me all the expensive crap you need to play.
Yeah, it is
like, go to
definitely
the
one of
play
those
rehearsal.
sports. Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the nice thing. It's probably one of the main reasons why something like soccer and even basketball to some degree are such global sports, because you need
don't need
a
much.
ball and
You need a hoop.
and a goal, and that's pretty much it. And so
And I was also the punter on the football team.
there you go, multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
So you did some soccer at Riverside.
Yeah, I played 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then lacrosse for 2 years,
Uh-huh.
punted on the football team for how many years?
I did it as a junior and a senior.
On varsity? Oh, I guess you had to be varsity,
course,
junior, senior.
man.
Yeah. So you lettered in 3 sports then.
Yeah, I did. It was sports. Well, it was weird because I was also like a theater kid in high school.
So I was going to ask, when the transition or just sort of the pivot towards exploring arts seriously began for you?
I mean, my first love was arts, actually. Like, even before I got into sports, my first love was drumming. Like, I remember my mom bought me all these trash cans specifically to turn over and for me to bang on. And I got my first drum kit when I was like probably 10 or 11. And actually my first paying job other than like mowing the lawn or taking out the trash, like chore stuff, was like the first time I ever got paid for doing something was playing drums.
That's
I was
impressive.
in a band in middle school, and we played at this club on Franklin Street under the post office. It was called Street Scene. It was like a teen club. It was like where like teens could go hang out and stuff. We got paid $50 a night to play. We were kind of like the house band, and I got all the Sprite I could drink, and I was kind of like a rock star. And yeah, so my music was really my first love, and then I sort of, my bandmates were a few years older than me, but we were playing at like Centerfest and stuff. We were recording in the studio. We'd made some like demos and made an EP, and like things were kind of moving along in like a pretty serious direction. But
any people in the band that I might know?
We had a sort of rotating cast of folks, but the core members were me, this dude named Michael Sikora. I don't know where these guys are anymore. Jeff Meddy. But this dude, Ben Flanagan, shout out to Ben Flanagan, who's still a world touring musician, guitarist. Like, he's a professional. Like, he tours all over the world and still plays music. So it all started with a cover of Nirvana's Lithium at the middle school talent show. And then we started a band and started covering stuff, and then started writing our own stuff. But my bandmates were a few years older than me, and when they graduated from middle school to go on to high school, I sort of like lost my musical companions, and I really sort of shifted my attention towards sports and where it would remain sort of until post college.
Yeah. And some of your contemporaries, the reason I asked about music is, folks like Duncan Webster and Joe Hall and Jeff Stickley and Eli and J-Law, are all part of the crew and have been playing music since middle school. And, I had the privilege of living with John and Eli from Lila for a few years. They were actually the first roommates that I ever had. And so it's pretty cool.
Those were good times.
Those
on
were
Anderson,
good times.
Man.
Yeah, that is Aaron Mandel and I talk all the time because he actually lived there for
so many
years.
people live there. I mean, the list.
There's a book there.
Yes, that is like that apartment in City of God. That like you go through like 20 years of its history and you just see all the things that happened in there. That's like an anchor spot for like Durham culture. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah. We definitely need to explore that oral history at some point. But so you graduate from Riverside, and then how quickly do you head overseas?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say it is weird that I look around and like most of my friends are musicians.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why that is. Like I don't know if that's just like the kind of people I'm drawn to, but like all my super close friends from growing up and a lot of the old Durham guys do play a lot of music.
Well, Durham is a good, if you're interested in the arts, Durham is definitely a spot for that in terms of the talent that's grown here, the types of people that get attracted to being here. I felt the same way when I was going to school. When I first started going to Durham Tech, I was interested in teaching. And then when Aaron gave me a chance to work with you all at Clarion Content is really when I started finding myself also in the arts community and specifically with music a lot more, and going into Dirty Durham meetings and hanging out with Patrick Phelps McEwen and then living with John and Eli and hanging around our friend Jeremy Rist a lot. He was getting into beat making, and just everyone I was around was making music and making art. I obviously worked a long time with Gabe, who's a prolific artist. So I agree. I think that there needs to be a narrator for these types of things, right? I think maybe that's why you got into filmmaking.
Yeah, it has this reputation of being sort of this art center, and I wonder like when that really started. Like we just were doing it as kids because that's like sort of how you were creative and how you like would bond and hang out and stuff. So I'm wonder like where is the moment in the timeline of the city that's like, oh, this is a place of the arts? And it probably was like before us, but that was just sort of, that was the day to day was playing music.
What did your parents do when you were growing up?
My mom worked at Duke in the department. She has a PhD in psychology, and she worked in the department of anesthesiology for a long time, being like a research professor. And then my parents divorced when I was like 7, so my dad was living over in Greensboro.
Gotcha.
And then my stepdad was an architect.
Okay, so an artist of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, but he was really into and good at photography, and he would build like these crazy little models. Like he would go on these like archaeological digs in Egypt like every summer, and so and they met in a jazz band. They both played big band jazz and stuff, and so it was around me definitely, and very encouraged. I was very encouraged to pursue that stuff. I mean, my mom bought my drum set when I was like 10 or whatever, and I even sort of blame my mom because she was the one who really gave me the shove into filmmaking that I needed. Like I sort of knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't really how do you go about it? And this was sort of before like everyone has a camera in their hands kind of stuff, and it was just sort of this seemingly inaccessible thing, but there's some very like obvious steps you can take to get into that.
So did that happen pre Euro trip?
Okay, so shove? you want to talk about the abroad situation?
I would love to, and I think our listeners would love to hear that as well.
Well, so my taste for travel started early. My parents were also scuba divers, and so my first international travel experience was going on a dive trip with them, and it was in this island called Roatan off the coast of Honduras. and I learned to dive. I got certified to be a scuba diver, and that just was like, it was a completely different world for me. So ever since then, I knew that there was a big wide world to explore, and I wanted to. My taste really got, my appetite really got whetted. I did a semester studying abroad in Spain in college, and that was my first experience of sort of living on my own in Europe.
Where were you in school? College?
I went to Goucher College, which is in Baltimore. It's a small, like, liberal arts school, kind of like hippie vibes.
Do they make small conservative schools? I feel like whenever someone says liberal arts school, they always say, "Oh, it was a small."
I don't know. There's like
school.
Liberty and stuff. Isn't that like some crazy
sure.
right wing Christian?
I don't know how big
fanatic
it is.
house or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I think
we should bring Tom in for this segment on Liberty. He would love to. Share
I don't know.
thoughts.
Conservatives don't like higher education, do they?
That's
They don't like people thinking for themselves.
Yeah, I don't want to get detracted from.
I don't either.
European conversation.
But no, I was. Spanish was one of my majors, and so to sort of cap that off, I did a semester in Salamanca, Spain, and I lived with this tiny old woman who didn't speak a word of English, and she was an amazing cook, and she was just the warmest lady I can imagine. That's like when my Spanish was at its peak, was like right then. But yeah, I mean, I was taking art history and literature and language, and the University of Salamanca in Salamanca, Spain is one of like the 3 oldest universities in Europe. So there was this incredible like old medieval town square and these cathedrals, just living there, and I'm doing a lot of partying there, and just sort of like really discovering who am I like out in the world, like not in a place I'm from, out in the world when I'm not with anybody else or not around anybody I knew. And I just loved that. And so that was really transformative for me, and I was immediately looking for any opportunity to go back. So I came back. So after my semester in Spain, I finished college and I moved to Chapel Hill and began working in a bar because I was like, oh, I'm not quite ready to like end my college lifestyle. So I worked at
Chapel Hill is a pretty magical place.
Well, Chapel Hill, it was, and like part of the draw to Chapel Hill is when we were growing up in Durham, there was nothing to do. Like if we wanted to party or like, get our drink on a little bit, we had to go to Chapel Hill. So that place really was formative in our discovering our transition to adulthood or whatever. But anyway, I worked at Top of the Hill before all its crazy expansions into like different rooms and bars and stuff. And it was just one little spot, which was a crazy phase of life. But it was also, while I was doing that, I started taking courses at Center for Documentary Studies at Duke, which is in Durham. And that's really what sort of set me on a track to pursue filmmaking as a career.
What was it that even interested you in pursuing that? Was there something that you did in Spain that made you think about filmmaking, or was it?
I'd always, like I mentioned, I was a theater kid, back in high school and stuff. So I was always interested in performance, and I just loved movies. And I realized at some point that I started thinking about how movies are made. Like, I realized that somebody's making the decisions about where to put the camera, where to put the lights, like what are we showing, when we cut to different shots. And I was really interested in that. So I sort of wanted to be a director even before I even understood what that was. But then it was, and so I took some production in school. Like we had like some video production classes, but it, there wasn't really a filmmaking track or anything, but I was a communications major, so I had access to all that stuff. But it was the first time I really got my hands on digital cameras and started doing nonlinear editing, and I really loved it. And it was actually, I didn't even know Center for Documentary Studies was a thing, and it was my mom that suggested that I like enroll in one of these courses. She was
still at Duke.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I took one course. I signed up for this course. I think it's called like the 5-minute documentary or something like that. And I had a great instructor, and I just like felt really, I loved doing it, and I felt like I had a knack for it. I mean, I'd always sort of been into photography and stuff too, so I was pretty good at composing images and telling stories and stuff. So,
and again, we should say that if you graduated in 2002, you got 6 years on me, so it's not a huge amount of time. But when it comes to the progress that technology and particularly filmmaking devices and photography devices have had in just that short window of time, you know, to your point, not everyone had access to equipment. They didn't have even the inclination to think about photography in the way that everyone is always thinking about composing images and videos for their social media these days. And granted, you know,
we do it without thinking about it now,
and there's still a clear distinction in quality, right? Just because everyone posts photos to their Instagram doesn't mean that everyone is a photographer.
Right.
And the same thing is true for video. Just because you can do a 15-second Instagram story doesn't make you Martin Scorsese. So I just, for clarification, there's definitely when this conversation is being had about filmmaking equipment and taking classes at Center for Documentary Studies, I'm sure they offer classes now around smartphone, you know, video and photo that they wouldn't have even considered, you know, in 2008,
Definitely
2009.
The coursework and the way they teach and even just the literal equipment they teach on has changed dramatically since I was there. But right when I was graduating college and sort of doing CDS, I feel like is right when sort of the democratization of filmmaking happened. It was right when there was like digital cameras that were small and affordable, and right when you could get like editing software that you could run on your laptop, so you could literally produce your own, you know, videos in your room. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was living with a friend of mine who he was a leukemia survivor, and he was training to do his first Ironman. He was like having this like great life transition to become a triathlete. He's still like an insane triathlete today. But like I was like, dude, that's like a crazy story. Like, let's make a movie. And so I spent a few years like roaming around with him, and there's like an amazing 4-hour movie about his Ironman experience. It's out there somewhere.
That you made?
Yeah.
We got to dig that up.
This was, I have the raw footage. This was also, I was doing this back in the time where I didn't understand the importance of like archiving material properly, or like creating a roadmap to get back into the edit or anything like that. I was just like, ugh, like I fried so many laptops, just like, oh, I'll just put the footage like on the hard drive on the computer. And like, so there's actually a lot to learn about like file management, storage, and all that stuff. Anyway, that's less interesting. All that to say that I finished my certificate at CDS, which took about 2 years, and I just got hired as an assistant editor at a production company. And that's right when and I was also thinking about going to film school, like doing the full like MFA thing. And that's right when I got the opportunity to like go live and work in France. And like literally I was outside of my job when I was like having this phone call. And I was like, oh man, I've like made it. Like I could see the rest of my career in front of me. But I got that call to like move to France. And I was like, I have to do this. I want to do this. And my original contract for the job I had, which was a bicycle tour guide, crazy, right? But amazing, was for 3 months to work for like a summer, like from, I don't know, June to like August or whatever. And I ended up staying over there for 4 years. So,
were you doing bicycle tours the whole time?
Yeah. But it was sort of seasonal work. So I would work 9 months out of the year. And then I'd have 3 months off in the winter. So I would work from like spring, summer, fall. And then the winter I would have time off, and I would go anywhere. Like I went all over the place. I would usually come home around Christmas and stuff.
And were you filming this whole time?
I made a couple small little things. But I really wasn't doing a lot of actual like video or film production, but I was doing a lot of photography. I was writing for an online magazine too, so I was a travel writer. So I was working on things that I think ultimately would help me in terms of filmmaking. I was telling stories, I was making images, but I wasn't actually making films. But I made a few short things, definitely. But I was and this was like right before the smartphone explosion. Like I remember right before I moved back from Paris, people were just starting to get iPhones. But like, so I was sort of not connected. I had a little stupid Nokia phone that you had to tap like the number 3 times to compose a text message or whatever. So I feel like that was my last like breath of innocence before I became like strapped into the
One of
network.
us.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I did a lot of photography and I did a lot of writing, and ultimately, and most importantly, like on the tours, I would tell stories. Like that was my job. We would talk about Louis the 14th and Charles de Gaulle and Napoleon, and like the French history is full of incredible characters. So like telling stories was part of what we do. And so it really sort of dialed in. And I was talking to all sorts of people from around the world, strangers, like building rapport, which in documentary filmmaking is one of the most important things you can do, is being able to establish relationships quickly, gain trust, and then, so you can work with whoever to tell a story. So it was all stuff that I think actually would function and help me in my filmmaking career. I didn't realize it at the time, though, but I was too busy just, not learning French. I should have been. Got to get back on my Duolingo too, man.
Yes. Join the club.
Yeah.
How did you end up coming back to the States? Did you just run out of, did your permitting
I was
run
sort of
out,
at a crossroads. Like there was some restructuring in the company. Like they were far more interested in hiring like people that already had work authorization in the EU, and like I had a work visa and all that stuff, but like the decisions I had to make were either like move up into a management role, which seemed super lame, or move to another city and do the same thing. So I actually got a job offer to go and work in Berlin, and I thought about it a lot because Berlin was one of the cities I really grew to love. I went there a bunch and had some really good friends there. But ultimately, I was like, if I'm going to be serious about filmmaking and try and do it, I need to go home and really start. And so I moved back to Durham from Paris. I was depressed for about a year. I lived with my parents while I was trying to like get my feet under me.
Was that just from having to come back and sort of face American life again?
Yeah, it was just, well, you go from literally having the world at your fingertips, which I did.
In Europe?
Yeah, when I was living in Paris, and just like, it's just anything was a train ride away or whatever, to living at my parents' house, and I didn't have a car because I sold one of the years when I decided to go back, I sold my car. So I was like, I need that money to get an apartment over there. So I was living at my parents' house without a bride, and like just starting to like hit up some old contacts and figure out how am I gonna create a job for myself, essentially. It was just a tough go, man, and there was some questions about, did I make the right decision, or am I making the right decision now about what I'm doing? And it was just tough times.
What was that first gig that turned things around for you?
I threw myself into a feature documentary film, which there was no money there, but I was like, I sort of viewed it as, this is like if I want to do this in the future, this is the step I need to take. If I want somebody to pay me to do this, then I need to do it for free to start. And so I just started working on a project with my old employer. We just sort of hatched this idea and started working on it, and it would end up being like my first feature film credits. And I started doing like little freelance jobs here and there. And this was around the time that Kickstarter was sort of taking off, and like any video person who's sort of like on the way up, like you definitely cut your teeth making Kickstarter videos and things like that.
Yeah, our friend Salim.
Salim is exactly the guy I was thinking of. He was the go-to Kickstarter guy forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, stuff like that. And then also just, continuing to sort of like try things. Like I did a couple music videos, like I did one for Lila, and just sort of practicing the craft, had to learn how to use new technology. So like when we shot the Lila Heart to Heart video, it's the first time I'd worked with like a DSLR to shoot video. So I was just taking these like self sort of educational steps to put me in a position where I could work on the things I wanted to work on.
So you move back, you are starting to find avenues to build up your skill set as a filmmaker. At what point do you feel like you've made the right decision and that you are ultimately on the path that you feel like you need to be on when it comes to being a professional. Because in the creative field, I feel like more than most things, really, there are a lot of ebbs and flows in those first few years where you catch a big break, you do that once, but then, it's a one-off, it's a short-term gig. And so then you're back where you started and you're constantly grinding. And now because of the internet or the proliferation of the internet, everyone is exposed to so many things all the time. So if this is something that I think about and struggle with a lot is, whenever I go to put pen to paper and write, or, it's metaphorical, I guess, when I put my fingers to the keyboard and want to write something and publish it.
I still write in notebooks. I still draw in notebooks.
I know they're important.
I'm an analog guy, man. It's as weird as it is, like, because, filmmaking is all digital now, but when it comes to documents, I like paper, man.
Yeah, I guess that may be the 6 years difference for us. But it's tough when, for me, I read a lot of great things on the internet, and then I go to write something of my own, and I'm like, man, this is just not good enough. And you're constantly in your own head, I think, as a creative, saying, is this good enough for me to put out into the world? Because it is very exposing, right? A lot of art comes from a very personal place. And so when you're putting it out there, you're not only putting out a piece of work, you're really exposing a piece of your own character to the world. And if you feel like it's not good enough, or you don't get the feedback that you hope to get on a piece, it can be really depressing and really defeating. And so I wonder just how you worked through that, and what maybe the tipping point was where you felt comfortable being a filmmaker.
I still don't. I still look at myself in the morning, every morning, and like, dude, what are you doing? Are you doing the right thing? Like, because there is uncertainty. There's no consistency in my job. You work on one thing, you go to another thing. Hopefully you develop some, relationships that are reliable and stuff. But, I definitely felt a turning point when people started calling me. When people started offering me work, and calling.
That seems like a good barometer.
Can you work on this or whatever? Because then it's, before it was just knocking on everybody's door and sending cold emails and stuff. But when people started calling me, or people hitting me up because people had been referred or whatever, that's when I felt like, oh, maybe what I'm doing does have some value and I can build on this. But there's still that fear of, I've been super busy since the start of the year, but is that going to happen next year? Like, I don't know. I think and I've talked with a lot of my colleagues about this, like, you have to be strategic about making sure that you have a variety of places that you can sort of source work from, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to come back here after college and work here, was I'd already started working on that network. And I think in arts in general, but especially in filmmaking, it's so about the network. Like, if somebody's crewing up for a job or a project, and somebody that somebody trusts refers you, they will hit you up, because it's such the stakes are so high in production in some ways that word of mouth is huge. And so and it's an art, and there's certain tastes, right? And so it's a little different if you're just looking for like a salesperson, right? For the most part, if sort of the routine of selling things, you can kind of plug and play wherever you like as a salesperson. Whereas as a filmmaker, even if you are talented, the referral takes it a step further and says, not only are they talented, but they fit what you're looking for aesthetically as a filmmaker. Or,
if you're an illustrator, right, and you're designing clothing or whatever, people come to you not just because there are a lot of talented artists out there, but it's your specific tastes
Right.
that people are also looking for. And so,
and there definitely is a big sales element to filmmaking. And like, I've seen it work both ways. Like, I've seen some people who are just great at the sales element, and so they can get themselves work and get themselves jobs, and maybe they're not, technically as good as producers or whatever. And I've seen it the other way, where there are people who create amazing work, but they don't get jobs, or they don't want jobs because they don't know how to advocate for themselves. They don't know how to, pitch something that they want to make for a client or whatever. So it's definitely part of the package in today's landscape, because while you're selling them like an idea and a vision and ultimately like content, God, I hate that word, a product, whatever it is, like you're selling yourself too, so and that's not my favorite part of it. I like doing the work, but there's all it feels like with filmmaking, you spend very little time actually working on the film. There's a lot of like bookkeeping and management and the selling part. Yeah. So there's a lot of other stuff that surrounds being a quote filmmaker,
or a creative.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I would love to just like, I'm sure painters would love to just sit in a room and paint. I guess some of them do, but they get agents or whatever, but
or start clothing companies.
Yeah, man, you know about that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I think it's one of the big missed opportunities that a lot of young folks have, and part of it too is, you're on social, but not quite as much as maybe somebody in my.
I got off Facebook. I might be back soon.
That's a good man.
I go through stretches.
That might be part 2 of this podcast, because we could talk about social for a long time. But there's this. Everybody wants to be front and center now because of social, or a lot of people want to be known. They want to be seen, and so it's difficult, I think, for a person with a business mind to. They want to be entrepreneurial and do their own thing. I hear this all the time. I want to just do my own thing. I have this vision. I want to do my own thing, and instead of saying, okay, my thing is I really like to sell stuff. I have a business mind. I know how to get in front of people. I know how to communicate these things to folks. Let me attach myself to somebody who is an incredibly talented, creative artist, painter, producer, filmmaker, and make this match work, right? Because I don't have anything to sell, and this person doesn't have time to do their art because they're constantly
that's a huge part of it
in the in their computer, sending emails and posting on Twitter. And Patrick Phelps McEwen, Tree City, he is a great person to follow, to see this happening sort of in real time. And I really appreciate that he's really vulnerable about,
he's very open about the process.
Again, those ebbs and flows of being a creative. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's a different time and era now, again, because of the internet and just all the things that came with, whether it's piracy or these huge corporations sort of squeezing the life out of the creative arts for profit, whether it's a music streaming service or a thing like YouTube or Vimeo or whatever it might be. It's a lot. It goes both ways. It's a lot easier to get online and start a blog, start a YouTube page, and make shit happen. On the flip side of it, anybody else can do it, and literally everybody's trying to do it. And
I mean, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about so many people are putting stuff out. Like, if you put your stuff out too, like, how do you not get lost in like a sea of content? Like, obviously, like the old saying is the cream rises to the top, but
But I don't think that's true.
I don't know.
I don't think that that's true. At least not at the pace that is sustainable for someone to keep putting their work out there and hoping that it catches. And this is where having that business mind would really benefit a creative person so that they can continue to make work that in theory should rise above the rest, and this business person can get it in front of the right people.
I think where you see this, what you're talking about, like most happening is like with YouTube creators specifically, because what you do is you create something great that people love, but then you have to keep doing it. Like if you're going to build subscribers or a regular following, like you have to put out stuff regularly. And so you'll see like these creators start to post every day. And the content has to be good because people have to keep coming back and they have to build their numbers. And what happens ultimately, that pace is unsustainable, completely burns them out. But if they're smart, they have basically built a following, created a brand, strategy. And then they can take that following anywhere.
Right.
You know, they can parlay that forward into something else.
Yeah. The other thing I worry about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as a filmmaker and as a creative, is a lot of stuff starts to get very formulaic. Mm-hmm. And because of the pace, you feel like you have less freedom to really explore different themes, different ways of producing whatever your medium is. Yeah. It's just, how can I get this out as quickly as possible? What is everybody else doing? You know, what's the formula? What's the thing that I can just plug and play in here and hope that it goes viral? And it sets your priorities in a different place. Now, granted, some people, that's what their priority is. They want to go viral. But I think about, you know, somebody like our friend Holland, who, you know, recently worked on his first web series with Hype. He basically, you know, there were days where he'd lock himself in his room and you wouldn't hear from him for, you know, days at a time because he wasn't thinking about how am I going viral. He was doing the exact opposite. He was like, you're not going to see me online. Don't talk to me. I need to work on my craft.
I admire that a lot. And that is far more how I approach stuff too. Like, I can't, my brain doesn't work in the sort of the turn and burn mindset. Like a lot of the projects that I've worked on and am working on, continue to work on, are very long term. Like they'll take 4 years to complete, you know? So, and then honestly, that's really challenging in an entirely different way, because you'll be working on something where there is seemingly no end in sight. How do you keep yourself motivated to stay working, to stay focused when nobody knows what's happening but you don't, there is no affirmation of, oh, great job, or the satisfaction you get of sharing, you know, the fruits of your labor, you know? So it's been a mental challenge. And actually, that's why I started the Runways, where Gabe and I did, was because I was working on something that was so, the end was so far away that I was just like, I just want to finish something. And so it just turned around a little video, and that's what it became. But I was a big Casey Neistat fan for a long time, and I would watch his daily content, but also like just thinking about what it took to do that was just completely exhausting. I was like, we are cut from a different cloth. Like I can certainly glean some inspiration and work harder and all that stuff. But man, the people who work at that rate and with that kind of pace. But you know, I'm not in it for fame. You know, to quote the god Tupac, all I want is money, fuck the fame. I'm a simple man, you know. So
what do you think that young filmmakers are missing coming up now? That's something that maybe you experienced that they just wouldn't have had the opportunity to because the era is different, or maybe again their priorities are shifted. But what advice would you give, or what do you think that they're missing that you know, some wisdom that you might be able to bestow upon the young listeners that I hope are listening to this show?
I mean, it's so daunting to try and make a movie, you know what I'm saying? But like we've said, it's so accessible now that you just have to make stuff. You just have to keep doing it. And when something sucks, and it will when you're making stuff, you have to learn from that and course correct the next time. Have you heard, I think it's Ira Glass that does that amazing sort of like spiel about how to improve your work. Like, you know, you're going to do stuff and it's going to suck and you just have to keep doing it, you know? So don't let the fear of creating something that's not perfect stop you, because if you're in the wrong field in general, if like that's going to keep you from making stuff. Like, we all made stuff because we had to and we wanted to, and it's what gave us life, you know? So,
yeah, I struggle with that all the time. I mean, I'm mostly, so I guess I'm trying to think of the last time that I did the show with Aaron, if I was officially at American Underground yet. But, so I started working at American Underground on their marketing team, and every Monday we put out a newsletter, and, you know, I want to write Shakespeare every time I put anything out. And my colleague, Kelsey, who supervises my work, is always like, it doesn't have to your point, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, like, we just need to get this stuff out. It needs to be on time. It needs to have the right information, and, you know, we'll improve on it over time, but, you know, it's not going to be your best work, and that's okay. And it's tough. And particularly now with folks that are online on these social accounts, the internet can be brutal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's a lot scarier to publish now and have people.
And the fact that people can comment anonymously and hide behind a screen name.
Right. But it doesn't, on your end, they don't feel anonymous.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. There is a mental fortitude and a maturation you have to recognize that and to be able to get over that. And so it's really tough to put not your best work out into the world and get back constructive criticism, but also some really nasty criticism.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, that's just what I was going to touch on, is like a very important part of the filmmaking process is like showing it to people and getting
unfinished
feedback. Yeah. And it's really hard to show unfinished stuff to people because you're bearing your soul in a sense. And this is something I still struggle with, is being able to accept criticism and, you know, not take it personally and use it to improve the work, you know. But something I think that I talk about this with, you know, my colleagues all the time. It's something we still struggle with, but it's such an important part of the process because it's easy. It's hard not to take that personally because you've created this and you're sharing it with someone, and someone's saying, but it's critical to,
and that's where it's good to have a good support system, to a good network of colleagues, of friends, of people you trust, who, you know, their criticism is coming from a good place.
Yeah, and be strategic about who you're sharing that early stuff with, and know and put it in front of people who have the work's best interest in mind. You know?
Yeah. I'm sure you have a running list like I do, but what are some of your favorite films or films that you look to or have looked to in your life for inspiration, or just some of your favorite films?
Can I take a pee real quick?
Yeah.
Everybody talking about pistols, Gats is boring. Came with a new topic to flip you, that's a urine. All pro, check the stats and style scoring. While you at it, double check that crystal you're pouring. Born of the pleads and needs of peeing geniuses. Broads don't see it since they don't got these conveniences. Thank God you's not a hole in the studio. When you gotta go, you gotta go. Before you flow, make sure you practice or you losing. You don't wanna miss and let the cactus get to oozing. If any contestant splash, she's disqualified. Even if one drip should slide down the bottle side. Put a bum in an even better pickle. Reality show, how far will you go to get a nickel? Let alone a buck. Listen by the window, you can hear him moaning, yuck. Remember, tomorrow is garbage day. It's not the kind of stuff you want to save and harbor away. Once it gets ripened and fermented, it takes on a bouquet that I should say is naturally scented.
All right, Ned, now that Ned is feeling refreshed,
The tank is empty.
You're up. Top films, favorite films, inspirations for your own work.
Well, I think that's a very tough question because, you know, these sort of different, like different things in different genres, and taste evolves. But I will say this: I mentioned anybody who knows me can expect this answer. But the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film from 1990, Jim Henson's Creature Shop did the stuff. That was the movie that when I saw it, I started to think about filmmaking, the process of filmmaking, how they made that movie, who was involved, what decisions they made. I noticed how different shots were. I was like, oh, that's a handheld shot, that's a tripod shot. Like I started to become aware of the fact that someone was creating my experience.
This isn't the one where they go back in time, is it?
No,
Okay.
That's
one of the later
third
ones.
Ninja Turtles film, which whatever. See, if you want the real deal, see the first one, 1990.
We'll put that on the list then.
Well, I mean, there was actually, because it is very dark and very gritty, and parents complained that it was too dark and gritty, and so the tone completely changed for the subsequent movies. But that's definitely one of my favorite movies. At this point, like I definitely think in terms of filmmakers a lot too. Like, so I love Spike Jonze. I love the Coen brothers. Those are a couple of my favorite filmmakers working. I love Iñárritu and Alfonso Cuarón and those guys. But I would say Heat is one of my favorite movies.
Interesting.
Big Fish is one of my favorite movies. Adaptation is one of my favorite movies. Man, there's so many.
These are some deep cuts.
Yeah. But you're
not like a huge Fast and Furious fan? Or...
No. Definitely not. I mean, I've seen some of the movies and but I'm probably not gonna go see the Rock and Jason Statham spin.
So I actually haven't seen that many of the Fast and Furious movies. I'm really interested in this one because I'm a huge fan of Jason Statham and I really like Idris Elba. Yeah. And they might be enough to sway me to go see it in theaters.
And it's the John Wick director, so you can.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you can expect some great action.
I haven't seen any of those either, and my mom is furious at me that I haven't seen John Wick 1 or 2.
The first John Wick film's pretty incredible.
I like Keanu.
I love Keanu. He's the one, dude. I'm gonna flip it on you, Justin. What are your favorite movies?
Is he Bill or Ted?
Fuck. They're coming out with a new one.
No.
Yeah, they start. I think they're filming it this summer.
I did see that.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible. Those were some of my favorite films as a kid. The Bill and Ted movies. We would always watch them at either sleepovers or particularly when we did the what are they called? Lock-ins for Taekwondo. It would always be one of the Bill and Ted movies or the original Mortal Kombat movie, which was pretty awesome. I never actually played the video games, but the movie was pretty sweet.
I think there's something really powerful about seeing any character that you've connected with. Well, you just said you hadn't played the games.
I had not played the games.
I mean,
not serious. I mean, I knew what they were. But
I have played Mortal Kombat for long years, and seeing any characters come to life in a movie, I still get super excited about.
This is a perfect segue into a movie that you and I have both seen recently. Avengers Endgame.
Oh my gosh.
That
we're going there.
Well, I'm
not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying
the bridge was laid
that is,
for us to.
There's so much to talk about.
There is, and we've been recording for 52 minutes, so we'll try to keep it relatively brief. But again, we've been on a little hiatus from the show, so people might want an hour and a half show. We'll see where it goes.
I think you're very entertaining, Justin. I would listen to you talk for hours.
I appreciate that, but you're the guest, so the people really want to hear you. They've heard me enough.
Yeah, but I'm interested in the dialogue.
Well, speaking of dialogue, Avengers Endgame.
Okay, but I don't think you could talk about Endgame without rewinding all the way back
to the original film?
films ago.
Yeah,
to the inception of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is fair to say has sort of changed the landscape of entertainment significantly.
So before we go there,
or we can just talk about Endgame. Whatever.
Well, yeah. So you used the word inception, so I do want to go through quickly a few of my favorite films because I want to know. I'm not a connoisseur necessarily, but
I think everybody has a right to whatever films they want, as highbrow or as lowbrow as they want.
I think I like some good films. I don't know that I could speak about them
Yeah.
quite in the same way that someone more. I did take an intro to film history class at Durham Tech, which I really enjoyed.
And you loved Minding the Gap, which I
did love
told
Minding. That's
you
another
about.
like yeah. Oh man, yeah, that movie was. I think honestly, Infinity War, Endgame, and Minding the Gap are the three films that have made me cry in the last like 5 years.
Man, God, I love tears. Movies are the only times I cry, so I gotta get it in when I can.
You need the full Jimmy Valvano experience. You need to laugh, you need to cry, and you need to. I feel stupid now even bringing that up if I don't know all three of the things, but yeah. So Aladdin was my favorite like Disney film as a
mine
kid.
too.
I
saw Aladdin multiple times in the theater.
I repped that real hard. I felt like Aladdin of all the Disney characters, not just because he was a light-skinned dude, but just like his arc from the rags to riches, but trying to stay true to himself. All that stuff really spoke to me. Pirates of the Caribbean, the original one.
The first one's an incredible film.
I watched 4 nights in a row in high school.
I definitely saw it in the theater twice.
It's pretty. Yeah, I think it's an undervalued. I mean, the series itself has kind of run off course. They've
that film
they've hit a coral reef somewhere, and
the ship is sinking. No, the ship's already sunk. Inception that is an incredible movie, though.
Is another one. That and Dark Knight both. I think Christopher Nolan did an incredible job with both those films, and it's remarkable that DC has not been able to follow that up. But that's again another conversation. Snatch. If you've seen,
of course, dude. Guy Ritchie is really interesting because he, started with such a bang. Well, he's directing the live action Aladdin movie that's coming out, and I don't know. I'm not sure.
Which is pretty surprising because I only knew him for Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels for a long time, and then he did the 2 Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr., which were both solid, and felt somewhat up his alley. But he did another.
He did The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
He did that, but he did another like
King
fantasy sort of Aladdin-like show or movie, and it's escaping me now. But I think particularly Snatch and Lock, Stock are in a category of their own for me in terms of.
It's interesting. I can't pinpoint this, but like Guy Ritchie's definitely like moved from being an independent filmmaker into like the studio system, and I feel like his like later studio work, like it still retains some elements of it, but I almost feel like he's the kind of director who does more with less. Like once you start giving him incredible budgets and unlimited access to this, that, and the other, like it sort of dilutes the sharpness in the wit that he's known for.
Constraints can be good.
What's that?
Constraints can be.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Salim and I talk about this a lot.
I think so. Yeah,
that to your point.
Setting parameters and working within those can be really good. And if you look at his first films, Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which were made, he had to hustle and horse trade to get those made. Like that's arguably his best stuff.
When a lot of those movies end up being driven by really great dialogue. Something that, when you're thinking about movies that have incredible CGI budgets and just can, to your point, kind of go wherever they please and have no restrictions, then it's less about the characters driving the film and it's more about the sort of
the spectacle.
Yeah, the Michael Bay type of stuff.
And to be fair, I actually think Michael Bay is a very capable director.
Yeah.
He just gets the shittiest scripts.
Yeah.
And why he's decided that he wants to make Transformers movies for a decade, we'll never know. But I digress.
So, yeah, those are just kind of a few off my list. But you're right about
it's a good list,
Endgame and yeah, I try. Okay, and so there's a lot of anime movies on there too, and you and I both got to go experience.
I was gonna say, what if like when you think of not like your definitive top list, but what's a movie that you love that people would be surprised to hear?
That's a good question because I think I've been more upfront about my nerdiness in my adult life.
Yeah, I'm a freak flag flying nerd.
Yeah, so I think people are less
no need to
surprised
hide.
about things that I would say that I really enjoy. But there's definitely some out there. I would have to think about it a little bit. So, well, one I saw recently that is one of Will Ferrell's lesser known films is The Other Guys. Have you seen that with Mark Wahlberg?
No,
It's
but
like a
I've
buddy cop movie.
heard other people say similar things, that it's
incredibly funny, and Mark Wahlberg is great in it. And
Mark Wahlberg
it's
has
underrated.
it within him to be incredible.
It's an underrated movie of that era. So that's probably one on the list. But yeah, I would have to go back. I mean, anime films are a big thing for me, and I really, really appreciate the Carolina Theater. I would love to shout them out for the stuff that Joe is doing over there, and just the programming that they have, and how willing they are to, they helped us with the screening for Hype, and we've done a couple community screenings for the American Underground there with a couple films, and they're just really on top of it with the retro film series, with the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival, and the horror film festival that they have there, and all that stuff. It's a really
we're so fortunate to have that.
Yeah, so I
They're
definitely
doing amazing stuff over
some
there.
love, and yeah, like I said, we got to do the whole anime film series there.
Yeah, man. I'm sure we'll see you at Anime Magic next year, dude.
Yeah, I'm disappointed I missed it this year, but
you weren't there.
I wasn't there.
Where were you?
I think they changed up the weekend that they did it.
So that
for
was
some
2
reason.
years ago that
So it
we
was 2
were
years
there all
ago.
weekend together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time flies, man, when you're getting
Sure does.
getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did promise an in-game conversation, but you're right. We should. So the first film, the anniversary of it was actually May 2nd, I believe. I get the Day in History newsletter from history.com every day, and so they keep me informed on all these different points in history. And Iron Man came out May 2nd, 2008. I was, I guess, a month from graduating high school, and no one saw any of this coming. Tommy and I were arguing on the way
Kevin
back.
Feige did.
Well, yeah, and there's some very smart, very wealthy people at Marvel and at Disney that played their hand correctly. But I certainly didn't know who Robert Downey Jr. was before Iron Man.
Yeah.
Tommy and I argued about how famous he was or wasn't, and
He
a lot of
was.
these characters.
He'd had a fall from grace though, and
which is mostly what I knew about
yeah.
him, was his public life, not his filmmaking career. But so they make Iron Man, which was arguably one of the better films,
One of the best, yeah.
To this day for the
Definitely.
series. And it was mostly driven by just how brilliant I think Robert Downey Jr. was in that role. And it's something that for folks that one of the most tired takes that I see now on the internet is like I don't watch Game of Thrones. I don't watch Marvel movies because I'm like above you as a human being because I don't participate
being
in
the
this.
abstainer is
Yeah,
cool.
I don't. Yeah, and I'm just like, that's cool, man, if you don't, but don't try and come into my zone and tell me that I am a nerd or I don't, I'm an immature child for giving myself to these films.
Yeah.
And
But it was a rocky road. I wasn't with him. I wasn't rocking with him the whole after Avengers: Age of Ultron. I was like, I'm fucking done, man. I had serious superhero fatigue, and I was like, these are stupid. Like, this isn't going anywhere. This is an insult. Like, I was very anti for a while. And
Well,
it was
films-
right in there in phase 2 before they got rid of that other producer. I think phase 3 has been incredible, but there was a moment there where, and I still haven't seen
the in-betweens.
Yeah, there's several of the Marvel films I haven't seen.
Yeah. Well, and so they do Iron Man, they do the Hulk with Edward Norton, who ends up not being the Hulk for the rest of the series. And people, I knew who the Hulk was. They had made the Hulk movie with Eric Bana a few years before that. I knew his character. I knew like the idea of the Hulk, like kind of what it means to Hulk out. but I wasn't familiar with Iron Man. I wasn't familiar with Thor, which was another character that they really struggled with throughout the series. I only think
I think it's fair to say Thor has arrived, though.
Yeah, well, they really hit a home run with
Ragnarok.
Yeah. and the director there, whose name I would
Taika
butcher.
Waititi.
Thank you.
Yeah,
if I tried to say it.
A joy to behold.
I mean, they really let Chris Hemsworth loose. But so to go back, so they do the first few films, and unless you're a huge comic book fan, you probably don't know any of those other characters, with the exception of maybe Hulk, only in name alone, and Captain America, who is more of a symbol than he to people than he was an actual
DC
character.
has the famous characters.
Yeah, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. Justice League was a huge show, animated show when I was coming up, and the Batman animated series
is
one of the
so
best
good.
things in television history.
So good.
Animated or not.
And I used to watch the old Superman show, the one that was made in like the 30s.
Yeah.
It actually has like incredible groundbreaking animation that costs like $1 million an episode to produce. Like if you watch that animation now, it is so full of life and so detailed and so rich. Like,
well, that goes to your earlier point about constraints and people doing more with less. So you're right. I mean, at that point, DC had the they probably had the mantle for superheroes, and the Spider-Man films with Tobey Maguire, the first one was okay, and then they got progressively worse. Same thing with X-Men. The first one was awesome, and
X2 was great.
X2 was great, and some of the casting was awesome, some of it not so much, and they've rebooted that series a few times. So Marvel was certainly on the outside looking in when it comes to films, and they chose characters that not a ton of people knew, and were able to really piece together this unique experience building a cinematic universe. And I don't know, Holland and I debated this a few days ago, if you can do cinematic universes in other genres, like could you make this is the show I used earlier, could you make a Sex and the City universe where like each character had its own series of films, and then they all had a meetup film? I just don't know.
Do you have characters that interesting who you want to follow all of their journeys? And I think that's the question,
right?
That like, it's like, can we build a universe out of this or not?
And it just had never been done. The one thing that I can think of that was similar to this was Clerks.
Kevin Smith's View Askew universe, where all of his wacky stuff is connected, and there's arguments that all of Quentin Tarantino's films happen in the same universe because of like the fictional brands, and like characters are actually related to one another, from, separated by generations in different films. But
it seems
it's
not
more,
so explicit.
No, it's more like subtle nods than it is actually like Venn diagramming and overlapping storylines and stuff.
And so I do, this could easily turn into another hour of waxing about Marvel, but something that I do think people, if they haven't seen the films, yes, they are superhero films, but there is, if you are capable to some degree of suspending belief and sort of removing the superheroism of these films, there are very complex ideas about what it means to be a hero, what it means to sacrifice, what it means to be part of a team, what it means to find yourself, that fantasy often explores. And I think that Marvel's been able to do that with a lot of different characters over time in this shared universe. And to your point, I do think that the Age of Ultron movie, which was Joss Whedon's last film, he did the first Avengers movie, and then again did Age of Ultron, which I was a big fan of his with Buffy, and then with Firefly more recently, and then the Serenity sort of tie together for Firefly. But he kind of swung and missed with Ultron.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those that was like very big and bombastic, and was like, oh, blue beam to the sky, like, the sort of the tropes that like, led to superhero fatigue in the first place. And it was thin on character and good writing and that nuance that makes things interesting. It was just loud and chaotic, and who cares? You know, that's what I that's what I remember thinking about it.
But they did really, of the characters of the actors and actresses that they used for these films, Robert Downey Jr., who has really carried the cinematic universe through the 22 films that they've done, was probably the most famous person. And for at least for folks in my generation, I would say that not too many people knew who he was. After that, probably Edward Norton, who didn't stick around in the films anyway. You had Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, who played Nick Fury, who was arguably
the biggest
on par,
name,
if not bigger than Robert Downey Jr. But he was in it. His character is a spy, so he's in it in the shadows.
Yeah,
he's a thorough.
He's not front and center.
Yeah, he's a thread throughout all the films, but he's definitely in the background. And folks like Scarlett Johansson, I think, really, the idea was that doing a superhero film would typecast you, right? Like if you did a superhero film, you'd only get these types of roles now, or people wouldn't trust that you can do other types of things. But even someone like Natalie Portman, did 2 Thor movies and then did Black Swan, right? So it's not unheard of to play a superhero and then go on to do great things, or to play a superhero and that be your great thing.
Yeah, it's more the move now to be an established great actor, and now it's like a gift to get a role in one of these franchises. You see it sort of happening the other way, where before it was putting these sort of undiscovered or actors making a comeback in these roles. Now you're getting people who are very well established. Put it like Benedict Cumberbatch, and all these people who are entering. Jake Gyllenhaal, who are known for their great work. Now they're becoming part of these franchises.
But even the flip side of that, I mean, I would say that Black Panther, which is I think the third after the
Did you like Black Panther?
I did. I had my issues with it, and we could, maybe we should do like our own breakdown for each movie. We'll have a whole separate channel for this, but Chadwick Boseman, not a huge name going into the film. Michael B. Jordan's probably the biggest, of this time. You had guys like Forrest Whitaker in the film, who, is obviously a well-known actor, but not prolific now compared to a guy again like Michael B. Jordan. Ryan Coogler as a director, at that point had only done Fruitville Station, I think. Maybe he did Creed 1 at that point already. But
that's why I was so excited for Black Panther. It was like,
but again, not a ton of big names. Trying to think of who the guys are of this era that would have really sold that film. But like, you didn't have the Denzel Washington of this generation playing the lead role.
Like Wesley Snipes tried to get a Black Panther movie made forever. And I think there really is some value into like casting not necessarily unknown, but not as known actors in iconic roles, because at some point you just see, oh, that's George Clooney. And it's like, he's not even playing a character. He's just George Clooney who's in this movie. Right. So yeah, I think that the effort that producers and directors go through sometimes to cast unknowns in iconic roles is important. Like, that's why it took them so long to make the Aladdin movie. Was like, they couldn't find Aladdin and Jasmine, and they weren't, they were trying to like scour the globe to find them and stuff. So I think that's a good move, but especially, and it works if you're doing something like a Marvel film, which you already know is going to have a box office draw. Yeah. It's a bigger risk having a no name attached to, some film that just could get lost in the shuffle at the box office. But.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious now what they'll do next with the series, now that it's basically wrapped up for this generation, right?
Yes. This era is at an end.
Yeah.
In some ways,
without spoiling the film, it is.
I think. You want to give a spoiler warning?
Well, and I guess the ban, the Don't Spoil the Endgame ban, officially lifted today. Yeah. But I will just say that certain actors and actresses' contracts are up with Marvel and are probably not going to be renewed. And so it is, regardless of what takes place in the film itself, characters like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, maybe, they're presumably not coming back. And so the torch is being passed to this next generation of even lesser known actors and actresses. And so I wonder if this cinematic universe will hold up, if the formula will be the foundation that they build off of, regardless of who they cast for these films. And will there be another outside of fantasy? DC is still working on their extended universe to some degree, but will this, how much has Marvel, and maybe this is a good place to wrap for now, is, how much do you think Marvel has changed the way that filmmaking is approached throughout the field?
Well, I mean, the really interesting thing is not only have they done this cinematic universe thing, which spans, 22 movies in like 11 years or whatever, but they're carrying these stories onto their new streaming platform, which is about to launch. So it's literally like there's a whole nother way that you can now experience these characters.
Well, and this has been Disney's thing since the beginning of time, right? They had films, they had TV shows, they have theme parks, they have merchandising, right?
But never, I feel like, was the storytelling quite so integrated and reliant on. But I think you see it, like Star Wars is definitely trying to do that. Like, this new series they have, The Mandalorian, coming out, and like there's several other, and it's all Disney.
Right.
There's several other like Star Wars trilogies that are being developed. So I think DC is hopefully letting go of the cinematic universe concept for a while and going with their sort of like, and I really hope this is the case, their Elseworlds, like kind of character-driven stories. Like, have you seen the Joker trailer with Joaquin Phoenix? That's what DC needs to be doing. They need to focus on making good films and use their incredible library of characters and not try and build this big thing that Marvel's done. Like, let it go, man.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what, to your point about Disney having the streaming service now and these things becoming more integrated. That's always been true for these franchises, right? I mean, even when it was just comics, the comics were integrated into each other. And if you read Spider-Man, you also read Fantastic Four, and you would see Spider-Man in Fantastic Four. And then when they had the action figures, you'd buy all the action figures to go with your comic book. And then when they started doing TV and film, they were, it's stacked and stacked. And when you have this IP that you can leverage, you're going to squeeze as much as you can out of it. And that's true not just for Marvel, but for any kind of entertainment, right? I mean, sports, they do the same thing. They have these players that have shoe deals and they do ads with Nike, but then they also do ads with Hulu. And so you have these crossovers, right? And everything's just working to capture our attention. And so I don't think we've seen the last of, shared channels of engagement. Definitely not,
because that brings audience, from one thing to the other. Right. Like, I mean, the reason that Endgame was able to make $1 billion in like 1 week or whatever it was is because you have people who love Spider-Man, and you have people over here that love, Guardians of the Galaxy. All those people are going to go see, the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame movies because they're able to establish different audiences and fans of different characters and bring all that together.
And they, I have, when we went to see Endgame, we went to the Alamo in Raleigh, and I got a green whiskey drink that was called like the Green Hulk drink or whatever. So, even the theaters are cashing in on an opportunity to leverage these IPs as well. So, this is a good place to wrap it.
We didn't even talk about Endgame. Did you
I know.
Love it? Did you like
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was the ultimate culmination of a huge, I mean, a decade plus of my life. And
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for storytelling. I'm a sucker for fantasy, for hero arcs, for things that take me out of a world that can often feel so stressful and challenging and depressing at times. And, you know, it seems like every day something on the news is telling me that the world is falling apart, and it's nice to be able to go to a film and have characters remind me that it's possible to look those types of challenges in the face and say, you know, and to feel like you can overcome them, no matter what the odds are. And so, you know, what is it? They've run it in the trailer a million times now, but, you know, Chris Evans' character, Captain America, says, you know, some people get over it, but not us. Some people move past it, but not us. And I think there's something that resonates with that. I mean, you can call it cheesy, you can call it, you know, comic booky or whatever, but it is, there are a lot of elements of those films, and particularly with Endgame, that I just felt like spoke to a lot of different characteristics of who I am as a person and the way that I see the world. And anime does the same thing for me in a lot of ways, the films that I really like. And so I don't want to lose that. I don't want to always have to go to a film and it be real. I don't need it to be real.
Yeah.
I understand going into it that there aren't going to be gods with swinging hammers coming down and fighting aliens and whatever. But in that 3-hour moment, that is what's going to happen. And I appreciate that. And so, yeah, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was incredible. I'll have to show you the picture and I'll post it on my Instagram if anybody's interested in seeing it. But I told Pete, Tommy's brother, before we were going, because Tommy and I have gone and seen every film after Avengers together in theaters the weekend it comes out. And so that's partly why I was so emotional after the film, is, you know, that was a bond that I had shared with the three of us. And I told him, I was like, there's a really good chance that I'm going to cry for a good portion of this film. And so, you know, somebody needs to make sure to bring the box of tissues. And Pete, there's a photo of us all holding Marvel beach towels that he bought for us to take into the theater to wipe our tears with.
Jeez, y'all really went for it, man.
I think so Eliza came with us too, and I think they all walked out unscathed and tear-free, but for the last probably 30 minutes of the film, I was basically in tears. And so that's how I felt about Endgame.
I mean, that's the other thing about like the longevity that they've established, is you get really connected to these characters and you feel very close to them, and you've gone on their journeys with them, and you've witnessed their highs and their lows. And that's what happens in a movie, ideally, is you go on a journey with a character and you feel their fear and you feel their joy. Now imagine being able to do that for a decade.
With,
you know,
who knows how many characters at this point.
That's what was so impressive to me about Infinity War. A movie that I've never seen a movie in a theater twice in the same day until Infinity War. But that's what was so mind-blowing about that movie to me, was that they were able to cash in on this that makes it sound cheap, you know, but they were able to pay off these intense emotional investments that you've had with these people over a long time. And they brought all these moving parts together in a way that was coherent and inspiring and meaningful, and it was just befuddling. And they weren't even the main characters. Thanos was the main character. And any movie that can even, you know, I guess technically he's the bad guy, but any movie that can even make you question the good versus evil, the reality of who am I going for here? Like, yeah, he's the bad guy, but I kind of feel what he's saying, you know, like that's incredible storytelling when you're forced to look inside yourself and say, oh shit, how do I really feel? Or what would I do in this situation?
I mean, that's what
that film challenged audiences to be like, who's right here?
Yeah.
And that's what, that's the apex storytelling in many ways.
And that's what I thought Dark Knight did so well with Heath Ledger's Joker is that same thing where you walked away and thought the Joker is out of his mind, but he makes a lot of really good points.
Yeah.
And I have to think about that as a human being. And so, people should go see Endgame. Sammy, I'm thinking about you specifically, people who haven't seen any of these films. They're really good films, some better than others, but particularly on the later half of the MCU, I thought they really started to find their footing in terms of director choice, in terms of character choice, in terms of story arcs. So go see the films. Don't be one of these people that's, all high and mighty on their high horse about not being part of this, fanatic fan base. Go see the films. They're great pieces of work. Go see Ned's work when it comes out as well.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about any of that.
Like I said, there'll be some part twos. Maybe we'll do an outtake or two here. But thank you so much for doing this with me. This is something
it's been fun. Anytime you want to talk about stuff and drink scotch, we can do that.
Yeah. I feel very passionately about both. So let's definitely do this again. Where can people find your work?
Hit me up on Instagram at Cosmic Gangsta, COZMIKGANGSTA, and my website is greenherofilms.com. And and I've got a lot. I'm working on a lot of interesting things right now that are probably going to be coming out within the next year. So it's going to be a big year for me personally as far as putting stuff out that I've been working on a long time.
That's awesome.
It's going to be it's a level up year for me, definitely professionally.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out.
Well, so go definitely follow Ned on all his platforms. Thanks again for listening to this show. As always, you can send me comments on Twitter and Instagram at Buddy Ruski. You can go on the website and find this show. It's also on all the streaming platforms, the Buddy Ruski Show. The website is buddyruski.com. Send me your comments. Send me the people that you might be interested in hearing from. I've definitely got a roster, a growing list of people that I'd like to interview. So back on the grind, getting those shows out bi-weekly. So be on the lookout for those. And again, thank you for your patience. It's been a little while since we did one of these, but I couldn't have asked for a better guest to go through this journey with me. So with that, enjoy your week, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace,
y'all.